Public key management. So up to now we learned about what? So how to generate public key certificates. For generating that public key certificate, what are the procedure you have to follow and what are the contents comes under in this public key certificate. So now question is how we'll get the your public key pair, that is private key and the public key. So for that you can take the help of the third party. That third party must be trusted here. So one more approach is there to get your public keys. Okay, public key pair means what? It contains your public key and the private key. One approach we know already learned, that is regarding the trusted third party. One more approach is there, that is what we call as a combined generation. The owner of the key pair generates the public key pair here. So here owner itself generates the key pair. The owner then submits that public key to a CA for generation of the public key certificate. So in the previous method, okay, they use the trusted third party. So then third party will generate the public key and private key, and that keys are used by the owner. So now in this approach, that is what we call as a combined generation. In this approach, owners itself generates the private key and public key. Once the keys are generated, so owner will submit that to the CA for getting the public key certificate. So let's see what are the advantages of this approach. As we know that owner is in full control of the key pair generation process. Now this key pair generation is what are the processes done by, okay, that is done. What are the process you are done for generating the keys is known by the owner only. So owner is having the full control over regarding this generation, and private key can be locally generated and stored without any need for it to be distributed, because you are the owner and you are generated and you are the responsible for to store that key securely. Distribution is also not necessary here. So these are the two advantages if the key pair is generated by owner. Let's see what are the disadvantages. The owner is required to have the ability to generate the key pairs. So here thing is what it is. If the owner is have the ability, then only it is possible. If you have the okay, capable to generate the keys, for that also you have to perform some complex operation, and how to perform those complex operation and which complex operation you have to use to generate the key, that procedure if it is known by the owner, then it is okay. If the don't know, then it doesn't works here. The owner may need to demonstrate to the CA that the owner knows the private key that corresponds to private public key submitted to CA for certification. Now here thing is what it is. Owner has to tell that, so I am generated the key by myself using the complex operations. Yes, I know my public key and private key. So now this one has to be proved to the CA also. So once CA is okay, verify the information as you are the owner and you know what is the private key corresponds to the public key. And one thing you remember, public key certificate is generated, and in the public key certificate only public key is available, but that private key is known by the owner here. Okay. So this is about your combined generation for getting the public key pair here. One more is there, that is what we call as a self-certification. Self-certification, the owner of the key pair generates the key pair and certifies the public key themselves. Since a public key certificate generated by a CA provides independent assurance of purpose of a public key. As one more approach, in the first approach you are getting the public and private key by trusted third party. In the combined generation you are creating public key and private key, but certificate is generated by CA. In self certification you are generating the key and you are certifying the public key by yourself here. So that is what we call as a self certification here. As we know that to get the certificate from the CA is also thing is what you have to prove yourself. Okay, if you want to get the public key certificate from the CA, then first thing is what you have to prove yourself that yes, I am the genuine user. I have the authority. Identification of the user is also very important. You have to prove your identification. Once identification is proved, then you have to prove that I have the capability to generate the public key and private key. With me, I have the private key. Yes, you can generate a public key for me. So then that procedure you can skip if you are generate your own certificate here. So that is what we call as a self-certification here. These are the three methods which are used to get the public key certificate. Okay. So next is, so once if you are create your public key certificate, so next is you have to make registration of those public keys here. So that is registration of public keys. It either trusted third party generation or combined generation of public key pair is undertaken, then the owner of the public key pair must engage in a registration process with the CA before public key certificate can be issued. If you want to get your public key certificate, yes, you already have your public key and private key. That may be you are getting from trusted third party or generated by yourself. Next thing is what it is, you have to register your public key. If you are registered, then only you will get your public key certificate. Okay. So that public key certificate if you are getting from CA, then procedure is what? First you have to register. Once registration process is completed, later you will get your public certificate, okay, by the CA here. So then what is the roles of RA and the CA can be separated for several reasons. So RA is the registration and CA is for getting the certificate here. So here if you want your public key certificate, so CA will generate or issue the public key certificate. For issuing that public key certificate, you require your public key and private key. So those public key and private key or must be registered first. Registration process is completed, then only CA will issue you public key certificate. So let's see what are the roles of RA and CA. Registration involves a distinct set of procedures that generally require an amount of human intervention, whereas certificates creation and issuance can be automated. So now registration means what it is, physically how to involve in registration. Okay, whereas creation of the certificate and issuing of the certificate is automatic here. And checking the credentials of public key certificate applicant is the most complex part of the certificate certain process. As I told, so if you want the public key certificate, so if you want that one, first you have to apply. So that's why you call as the applicant. Applicant credential is very important because you have to prove your identification. So for proving that identification, you require the credentials. Either it may be password or any other way here. Okay. So next is centralized checking of credential represents a major bottleneck in the process, particularly for large organization. So if you want your license, I'll take the example, if you want your license. So for getting that license, is it easy task? No. First you have to register yourself. So for registering that, what are the procedure you have to follow? In the same way, here we need to prove the credential of the all the applicants here. So for credential of the applicants, okay, for example, if I want to go for the any large organization, then number of applicants are more. In that organization, you want to make communication. For making communication, you require public key and private keys, and those public keys and private keys must be certified here. You want public key certificate, so applicants are more here, so then all the credential verification of a credential is also very difficult task. Okay, so that's why distributing the registration activities across a number of local RAs which perform the checking and then report the results centrally. So here thing is what it is. First, for getting your public key certificate, checking of credential is very important. So that is what we call as a registration. So that's why during making registration, credentials of the all the applicants are verified. Once if it is verified and once if it is proved that yes, this applicant is okay, identification of the applicant is proved and this applicant is authorized user, then it transferred that to the CA and CA will create a public key certificate here. Next, you may have the question, what credentials should be presented to the RA during registration? As I told, credentials of the applicant is verified by the RA. So, during registration, what credentials are required? So, let's see. A very low level of public key certificate might simply require a valid email address to be presented at registration. One credential here is the email address. The registration process might include checking that the applicant can receive email at the address. So for this is the first credential is what it is, email address here. So next is registration for public key certificates for use in a closed environment. So here this is what are the closed environment means what it is. It is known by the RA and that particular applicant. It is not an open source here. Okay. So next is commercial public key certificates for business trading over the internet might require a check of the validity of a domain name and the confirmation that the applicant business is legally registered as a limited company. Registration of the business is also very important if it is for the business purpose, if you want commercial public key certificates. Next is public key certificates for incorporation into a national identity card scheme require a registration process that unambiguously identifies a citizen. So now public key certificate, it is based on the identification. So for making identification, identity card is there. So that is identity card you can use to identify all the citizens here. Credential might include birth certificate, passport, domestic utility statements, etc. If you go for the anything, if you want to open for your bank account, there also you have to prove your identification. For proving that identification, what they will ask usually, they will ask your voter ID, passports. If you are having the passports, you show that credentials. Okay. Next is your Aadhaar card. Like that, to get the public key certificate also, these are the credentials they use to, okay, prove that you are the genuine user. Next is proof of possession. The attacker obtains a copy of alias verification key here. So if what happens? This is a public piece of information, so the attacker can easily obtain this. As I told earlier, so verification key. If you want to get the public keys of the any person to access that, you require verification key, and this verification key is the piece of information and it is publicly available. In that situation, if attackers get your verification key, what happens? The attackers will present alias verification key to an RA along with the attacker's legitimate credentials. So now thing is what? Verification keys of the alias is known by the attacker and attackers will take that key and they will prove to the RA that is what I am having the credential here. So the RA what they will do? RA will verify the credentials and instruct the associated CA to issue a public key certificate in the name of the attacker for the presented verification key here. So all the credentials are verified by RA and RA will recommend to CA to issue the public key certificate actually in the name of the attacker, but attackers using the credentials of alias here. Then what happens here? The CA will issue the public key certificate for the verification key to the attacker here because all the credentials are proved here. So due to that reason, so attackers will get the public key certificate here. So now nowhere that security is provided here because thing is what it is, this attacker is not a genuine user. Attacker is the authentication is proved here. Attackers will prove that I am the genuine user with the help of the alias credential. Then what happens in future? In future, this public key certificate is distributed among all the users. Whoever have this public key certificate, they all will communicate with the attackers, and all attackers can harm all those users here. So next question is how you prevent from such type of the problems here. So for that, what is the thing you have to do here? To prevent from such type of the attacks, CA will conduct a simple check that the public key certificate applicant knows the corresponding private key. This type of the check is referred to as a proof of possession of the corresponding private key. Because thing as we know that private key is known by allies only. Allies only know the private key, and allies public key and verification is the public. Remaining others can also know it. Okay. So in that situation, attackers will get the public key certificate with the public informations available from the allies here. So that's why to prevent from such type of the attacks, okay, what CA must do? CA must check the private key of that particular person. If the attackers prove the credential. While proving the credential along with the public key, if the CA asks you what is your private key, because attackers don't know the ally's private key, so then you can prevent from such type of the attacks here. Okay. If the public key is an encryption key, then one possible proof of possession is also as follows. This is one, okay, proof of possession, and one more proof of possession is available. Let's see what it is. The RA encrypts a test message using the public key and sends it to the certificate applicant along with a request for the applicant to decrypt the resulting ciphertext here. Okay, so here what is the procedure they are doing here? So RA will encrypt, because RA will know the public key of the attackers, and with the help of that public key, RA will send some message to the applicant and ask the applicant to decrypt the resulting ciphertext here. If you want to decrypt the ciphertext, applicant must know the private key, because you can decrypt with the help of the private key here. If the applicant is genuine, then decrypt the ciphertext using the private key and return the plain text message to the array as an acknowledgement here. An applicant who does not know the corresponding private key will not able to perform the decryption to obtain the text message here. Okay. So in this way you can prove that you are the genuine user here. So you can prevent from such type of the attacks.